Welcome to Sitting with Sallie. I'm with Wilma Scott, and this is going to be known as the Yummy Show. If you've been watching Sitting with Sallie, will know I've asked Wilma to join me a couple of times, and we've actually gone out to her garden to see how things grow. And now we're going to talk about, after you've done all that hard growing work, what happens to the produce. Welcome, Wilma.
Thanks, Sallie. It's a pleasure to be here.
And look at all this food. This is amazing. What do you do with the food?
Well, I preserve it for winter, and I don't have to go to the grocery store very often to buy vegetables because I just can go to my cupboard and pick out what I need.
And I've seen your cupboard, and it is full.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about preserving, can you just talk about different ways that food can be preserved?
Sure, yeah, you can preserve food in a few different ways. One is by dehydrating or drying. One is pickling. Canning is another method. Freezing is another method. Making jams and jellies is another way of preserving fruits and some vegetables. There's hundreds and hundreds of recipes for making really good preserves for the winter. And the other one, which is making sort of like pickling, but not really, it's fermenting, and that's when you have cabbage and you make sauerkraut.
And kimchi.
And kimchi, yeah. And they're not considered pickles, I don't think, more as they're a fermented food. And very good for you.
I was
going to say
probiotics. Good for the digestion.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of what we have displayed here is the end of summer root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, turnips, and squash and tomatoes. But you were telling me earlier that you actually preserve food all the way through the season because, of course, things are ready at different times.
Exactly, yeah. Well, for example, I have radishes that I dehydrated that I'm going to try using just as a flavoring. And these were early on in the season. And when it comes to doing, things like jam and jelly, you usually do it when the fruit's ready, and you have some fruit that's ready early and some that's ready late, and some that you might expect to be ready early that is
depending on the season, yeah.
And depending on the variety, like I have strawberries that are ever bearing, and there's still strawberries on the plants, and I also have raspberries that are still on, but now that I've had a frost, of course, that kills the fruit.
So generally, strawberries can be ready end of June. That's when you would start doing jams with them.
That's right, yeah.
And then the raspberries come in, and then the blueberries.
Yes, yeah, and then you get cherries that are ready in early August, like the sour cherries. You have, plums that might be earlier in August or early September, apples in September.
And what are you doing with all the berries then, and cherries?
Well, what I've done this year, just because I didn't want to do the jelly and jams right away. For the jelly, I've extracted the juice and I have frozen it, and then when I have time, I'm going to make my jelly. And the same goes for some of the fruit that I've frozen whole. I can do jam, whenever I feel like doing it because it's all frozen.
And I have a friend who makes wonderful plum liqueur from plum juice.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So back to the radishes. I'd never thought of doing anything with radishes but putting them in salads. You preserve them, then what are you going to use them in?
Well, I think what I'll probably do with them is I'll put them in my blender and grind them, and then it can go into salad dressing. It'll be a powder. It can go into salad dressing, or you could put it in anything that you want a little different flavor into. I'm still playing with that. I haven't tried them yet.
And I know you've done that with garlic.
Yes, I
have
onion. Garlic right here in this. This is dehydrated garlic.
It's a gorgeous golden color.
It is very
and
nice.
I've tasted it once it's dehydrated. It really concentrates the
yes,
flavor.
it's very concentrated. Yeah, yeah. And you can just rehydrate it if you wanted to. Like, say, for example, you were making a stew and you want garlic in it. Just throw a little bit in, not too much because it's really strong. But you could throw 3 or 4 cloves, or 3 or 4 pieces, which would probably be at least 1 large clove.
And you could also, I have an old coffee grinder, but I grind a lot of things, so
Yes,
you could
you
put
could
it in,
grind it.
and then you have garlic powder.
Garlic powder, exactly. Yeah.
You've done the same with onions?
Yes, I have onions over here. These are dehydrated onions. Now, these aren't crushed, but this jar is leeks.
Oh my goodness.
Crushed, so that's leeks.
And they have a slightly green, yellowy green.
Yeah, a little bit green, and the onions are more yellow.
And this to me sounds like that it's all going to be perfect for stews or
Soups, yeah, or
yes.
salad dressing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and what else have you dehydrated in this pile?
Well, I've got some corn. I've got, this is corn. This is corn that I dehydrated and it's still the kernels.
Okay, and you can see that.
And this is corn that I ground up, so it's cornmeal.
Cornmeal. And I know I opened that and you could just smell the corn. It just came out. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in some ways, when you can buy a lot of this, I don't know about dehydrated corn, but you can certainly buy cornmeal in
Cornmeal
the
you
store.
can buy, yeah.
It doesn't smell like your cornmeal.
Well, because it's fresh.
It's fresh. So that, and you aren't using any preservatives in
No,
it.
no preservatives in any of this. Like everything that I grow is organic, and that's something I've always done and I'm always going to do. I don't want to be putting pesticides or
I'm a believer.
insecticides on my stuff.
No,
Yeah.
for sure. Now the cornmeal, something like that, keep it dry, keep it in a dark
Yeah.
place. How long will
And
it keep?
sometimes I keep it in the freezer. If I feel that there's any moisture in it, I'll put it in the freezer just so it doesn't spoil. And if it's really dry, you can keep it on the cupboard for a few years and you really don't need to worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I have a little jar of zucchini here that I did last year. And it's dry as can be. And they're just hard little nuggets.
They are. Now that was the like we can't see, but that was a
Yeah,
zucchini.
it's one of those. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is also ideal for people hunting, camping.
Backpacking, hiking.
You could put
Yeah,
everything together
you
for
could put a meal
stew.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you just take whatever you need for your dish and put it all together. Like there's dehydrated tomato over there. And this,
Dehydrated tomato. Oh,
yeah.
look at the
So
colors.
you could, if you're making a tomato sauce, you could just, put that in. You
And
could chop them if you want.
I know you can buy dehydrated tomato in oil,
Yeah.
but you've got it just because it's
Just plain. If you want it in oil, you just put olive oil in with it, and it'll, you'll have your oil tomatoes.
You've done this in a dehydrator. Someone
Yes.
at home can also do this in the oven.
Yeah, if you can get the temperature low enough. The idea is to dry it, not to cook it.
So it's it's about 180, under 200.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And we have over here, this is my dehydrator, which is a very basic one. You have a fancy one, was a bit too awkward to bring in.
Well, it's large. It's a big one, and it has about 9 trays. Yours has 1, 2, 3.
5, I think.
Okay, yeah.
So mine is
But
very,
it's all the same
very
idea.
basic. You
Same
can
idea.
put, you put the different, slice them up, put it in the different shells.
Yes, yeah.
Mine doesn't have a thermometer, so I actually have a little thermometer here. And this one is just easily controlled. You can control the temperature by adjusting that. Yours has a little temperature dial, I presume.
Yes, it has a thermostat on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I checked, and Canadian Tire actually does carry these. I was asking you earlier about where you get a lot of the things that you need to preserve. And you said basically everything is at Canadian Tire.
Home Hardware, Canadian Tire carries, like they carry the jars, they carry those white lids which you can put on instead of using a canning lid, because you don't really need a cap and a ring for dried stuff.
It doesn't have to be
You
airtight.
do for things that have to be heat processed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anything, we're going to take a break and talk about other ways of preserving. Anything else you want to talk about dehydrating? There's a couple of books here,
there's,
but
yeah, there's all sorts of good information, good recipes on dehydrating. I was just going to say I've got some lemons and some oranges that I dehydrated. Those are lemons.
These look beautiful.
And you could just grind those up. And this is orange peel. If you're dehydrated orange peel, if you're baking and say you're making a chocolate cake and you want a little orange in it, I would just grind some of that up and you'll get a really nice orange flavor.
And this would also be nice to grind up for a salad dressing or
Oh,
spinach.
you probably could, yeah. And then the oranges themselves, so these were the oranges that I peeled, and they make great snacks. They're nice
they
and
look
crispy.
really good.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you're talking about snacks, you can make chips. I've got a
Yes.
recipe for zucchini chips, which I'm dying to try.
Yeah.
And have you?
And leather is the other thing that you can do. So this is crabapple leather.
Oh, look at that.
And it's just so tasty. You don't have to add any sugar. It's just I cook the apples up and I put them through strainer. Just get the apple pulp and then I put it on Mylar sheets, dehydrate it, and it's good apple leather.
Well, we're going to take
Kinda
a short,
sticky.
kind of sticky. We're going to take a short break while we try the apple leather. Join us in a few minutes. Welcome back to Sitting with Sallie. I'm here with Wilma Scott, and we are talking about preserving food. And Wilma, we were just talking about dehydrating. Let's move on to jams and jellies.
All right.
Tell me about how you preserve fruit.
A lot of the fruit that I grow, I put into jam or jelly, and quite often I do get fruit given to me, and so I'll use that for my jellies or jams.
You had several barrels of crab apples.
Oh, I had 23 gallons of crab apples that my nephew gave me, and they were really nice crab apples, but it was an awful lot to deal with. So I made applesauce, I made fruit leather, and I did...
Which we were tasting
Yeah.
at the end of it.
I chopped some up and made pies out of them, but the majority of it went into juice that I will make into jelly later on. So all of my juice that I've extracted from the fruit that I have is in the freezer, and I'll do it when I have time later on when it gets a little bit cooler.
This is a winter project.
For me, I used to do it in the summer, but this year it's going to be a winter project. So I have a couple of jars. I have a jar of crab apple jelly. Now this jar was from last year. I did it up last year in the winter.
Just turn around to see
in
the
March.
gorgeous color.
Yeah.
Okay, I can hold it.
You got it?
Yep.
And the other one that I did is grape jelly. So from my grapes.
And I don't know if you can see through the jars, but jelly is just one color. There's no visible fruit in it.
No chunks of fruit. It's just a juice that you use pectin if you need to, and sugar, and that's your jelly.
And the pectin is what makes it set.
That's right.
But you don't always need to add pectin.
Not always. There are some fruits, like the crab apples, that don't need pectin. So you can make your crab apple jelly with just the juice and sugar.
And you were saying the grapes?
And the grapes, yes.
And these are grapes you grew?
Yes,
And
off my grapevine.
You have a wonderful grapevine that's
It's not very
taken
old,
over.
and it's done so well. Yeah, it's been really good.
And raspberry, you don't need pectin with it?
No, you don't need pectin for raspberries. The seeds have a lot of pectin in them, so they will gel your jam.
Okay. So you can buy pectin for other fruits that need it,
Yes.
but what else can you do?
Well, you could make marmalade with citrus fruits, and you could make another combination with nuts in it, which is a conserve.
Okay.
And
So if I use concentrated crabapple juice, could I add that to a fruit that didn't have pectin?
yeah, you could.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll get a different flavor because
Sure.
you'll get the combination of whatever the fruits are, plus, the crabapple.
What's your favorite jam or jelly that you've made?
My very favorite is raspberry. It's always been raspberry. Well, I shouldn't say just raspberry. Pin cherry. Pin cherry is number one, but they're hard to get.
You have made two things I love. One is your strawberry jam, where there's chunks of strawberries all the way through it, and the other one is your Christmas marmalade.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
And
that's good.
That is so yummy that people
Yes.
fight for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real good one. Yeah.
And it's amazing because we're in such a northern climate, but we do have fruit.
We do.
And it makes sense to be able to keep it so we've got something good to eat in the wintertime.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot of good fruit out there. We've got pin cherries and choke cherries and blueberries and
You've got gooseberries.
gooseberries, currants, haskap berries. Yeah, there's a lot of berries that will grow in this area.
And
Sour cherries is another one.
Doug loves Saskatoon berries, being from Saskatoon, which
Right.
they don't grow that well here, although
don't-
there's some,
yes.
but Manitoba for sure.
Yeah, I think the Saskatoon's like sandier soil, and
Yeah.
my soil is clay.
So we have this beautiful color,
Yes, that's antipasto.
antipasto. And what is antipasto?
It's just wonderful. It's just good food. Okay, antipasto is a combination of vegetables. So this one has cauliflower, carrots, celery, and peppers.
And tomatoes.
And tomatoes, yes. And then when I go to serve this antipasto, I will add probably tuna, a tin of tuna, a can of button mushrooms, and olives, black olives. And then you just eat it with bread or crackers or.
Now, this is canned and
Yes.
sealed to preserve it.
That's right.
During a break, you were saying that you wouldn't add the mushrooms or tuna or olives in here.
That's right.
And why?
Because they may not keep, and the one thing you've got to be careful about is food poisoning. You don't want to put something in that maybe it needs a longer processing time, and it might spoil your whole batch of whatever you're making. So when the recipe says don't do it, then I usually don't do it.
The whole point of canning is you're worried about botulism?
Well, food safety. You just don't want your jars to not seal, and you wouldn't want to eat something that hadn't been sealed properly, because you could get very ill.
Yeah. And everything, different things need different lengths of time in the canner.
Yeah, it depends on the acidity of the vegetables that you've got in there. Now this one has carrots in it, and carrots are really low acid, so I do this in a pressure canner, and what the pressure canner does is it raises the heat above boiling point, and so all the air is drawn out, and your food is going to keep, and you process it for a long time. If you were doing it in a regular boiling water bath, it might take 3 hours to process that, where with the pressure canner you can do it in 75 minutes, and it's good.
So you use a pressure canner. You definitely need a pressure canner for meat.
Yes.
And for all vegetables or
Any low acid, actually tomatoes are considered a fruit, so you don't need to pressure can tomatoes, but if you were doing carrots or beans or peas, you need to, the safest way to do it is with a pressure canner. I wouldn't recommend doing it just in a regular water bath.
right. So when you're doing something like the antipasto,
Yes.
you preserve it to the lowest acid ingredient, like the carrots.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Complicated, but makes sense.
Yeah.
What else? Let's move on to pickles.
Okay. All right, well,
I
I've got a
know-
few different kinds here.
Look at this gorgeous color.
Those are bread and butter pickles, and when I was selling vegetables and stuff at the farmer's market, this was pretty much my #1 pickle seller.
I remember
and-
someone ordered 2 boxes of them or something.
Oh, I have one wonderful customer, and he's ordered 4 dozen at a time.
Mm.
So, yeah, so they are, they're a good pickle when they sell like that, yeah.
What's in your bread and butter pickles?
Oh, you're asking a trade secret here, Sally.
Generically. So you need some
cucumber, onion, peppers, vinegar, sugar, and spices.
And what's the pickling? The vinegar is a pickling agent,
Well, the vinegar is the acid that
Right.
you need, yep, to preserve it.
and you need the
And
sugar too.
sugar also helps to preserve food, yeah.
Okay, so that is one, and when I can see this.
Yeah, those are dill carrots.
Oh, look at them.
Yeah, and they're preserved in, a vinegar sugar solution as well, with garlic and dill and.
And when you're preserving pickles, you're canning them. Do you have to use a pressure canner? or-
No, not for pickles.
Because
of
of the
the
vinegar-
acid. Yeah,
vinegar,
the acid in
okay.
the vinegar. Yeah.
And do you have any other pickles on display?
Yes, I've got, these are the yellow squash that you have in your basket there. That's made of the yellow squash and onions and spices and vinegar and sugar.
Well, that would look really attractive.
Oh, and they're a little spicy. They're tasty. Yeah, and this one is another pickle, and this is Daikon Radish and carrots, and these are star anise, these black things in the bottom.
Oh, Mr. Ryan is slightly clovey.
Licorice.
Licorice.
Kind of a licorice taste, yeah.
And the daikon radish, is that the long white radish?
Yes, they grow. They're huge. Yeah, yeah. I've got a whole bunch of those in the garden.
And they're good for breaking up the soil.
They also break the soil. Yes, they do. They're a really good crop. If you've got heavy soil, you can
Now,
plant daikon radish.
can you eat them raw?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But you could put them in soup or stir fry. Yeah, there's different ways that you can eat them. And the tops also are very edible, and the seeds are also edible. The little seed pods are nice in stir fries.
So the tops are edible, like all top greens, like
The
beet
greens and the
yeah.
stem also. Yeah.
Yes, and it's quite fascinating because you're showing one jar at a time, but your pantry at home is rows and rows of these lovely, lovely foods.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else in the pickle family?
We could talk about the sauerkraut maybe. That's a fermented, that's soup. This is sauerkraut, which is fermented cabbage.
How do you ferment cabbage?
Well, you have to slice it in little strips, and then you
With a mandolin, kind of?
yeah, you could use mandolin, or you could just use a knife if you didn't have a mandolin, or a shredder if you have a shredder. And then you mix it with salt. And what I do is I have really large jars, so I layer sauerkraut and salt in these big jars, and you have to push it down until you get juice coming out of the cabbage, and the salt helps to extract the juice, and it has to sit until you've got that sauerkraut.
You're actually going to start smelling a bit of,
Little,
as
yeah,
it ferments. I
yeah,
mean, ferments means alcohol,
yeah,
right?
well, yeah, or vinegar, yeah. And so it sits for, a few weeks until it's ready, and then I process it in jars.
And is it processed like pickles in the canner?
Yeah, I do it in the canner. I don't use a pressure canner. I just use it in a regular canner because it's already, preserved pretty much with the salt that's in it.
Right.
So I just want the jars to seal.
So is it just cabbage and salt and fermentation?
Yeah, but you can add other things to sauerkraut. I have another batch at home that I'd put celery and carrots in, and you can put different kinds of spices in. You could use, sorry, can't think of the name. Little berries, juniper berries.
Oh yes,
juniper
yes,
berries
that
are
would be nice.
really good in sauerkraut. Yeah, but they're not something you just see in the grocery store.
No, I was going to say, do you buy them or do you go out and pick them?
Well, I've picked them, but
'Cause I know we have some junipers
yeah,
around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take another short break, and I hope everyone was taking notes because you've given us a lot of information. Join us soon. Welcome back to Sitting with Sallie. If you've been watching this show with Wilma Scott, you will be hungry. And Wilma, that looks like a lovely jar of soup, but you won't tell me what kind it is.
Well, that's a vegetable soup, Sally. That's got just about every vegetable that I have in there. There's carrots and corn and potato and onion and green beans.
Everything that you grew.
Everything that I grew, yeah.
And much more, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and it was, I processed in the pressure canner because for soups you have to process it and make sure that everything is going to be good.
And during the break, we were talking about how important safety is.
Yes.
To all of this.
Yes.
And that you can't fool around with.
No, you really have to be careful that you've got enough acid in your, when you're making pickles, that they have to be acidic because that helps to preserve your food. And when it comes to processing, you have to make sure you follow the directions. Like, my advice is for anybody that's going to start out doing canning, pickling, whatever, is get a good basic book and follow it. And when you're really comfortable with doing, making your products and you're finding they're working out really well, then if you want to, say, change things a little bit with combining different fruit, then do it. But don't do it, until you're really being successful.
Well, it sounds like while you play with different fruits, you're very particular about how much time things need to be in the canner.
That's right, yeah.
And this is tomato salsa. We had looked at some antipasta before. And this is salsa. Tell me about the salsa.
That's salsa. It actually has zucchini in it. This is a zucchini salsa, but it has zucchini and onion and tomato and spices and vinegar and sugar, and it's like
yummy.
it's yummy. It's great on scrambled eggs or whatever you like your salsa on.
And this, of course, goes to all the lovely tomatoes.
Right.
And they look like Roma tomatoes that you grew?
Yes. That particular tomato is called San Marzano, and it is so prolific. It has just given me a lot of fruit.
And I've seen that fruit sitting in trays in your kitchen.
Yes.
What are you going to do with all the tomatoes?
Well, I've done the antipasto, I've done the salsa, I've put it in my soup, I've canned it, I've dehydrated it. There's a jar there of the dehydrated tomato, and I might do some juice.
And I love the dehydrated tomato.
And I've
It's
done
so
sauce.
concentrated.
Yeah, and I'll do tomato sauce with
Tomato
those as well.
for
yeah.
pasta and other things.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, last but not least, I know you showed us some of the
Yeah.
zucchini,
Right?
but you were talking to me the other day about how you are drying the zucchini to make noodles, almost like instead of lasagna, a healthy
Right,
alternative.
yeah. So what I do is I'll slice them. I'll slice them lengthwise in about 1/4 inch thick slices, trim all the ends off. I put them in the dehydrator, and half dehydrate them. I don't want them dried really hard like the little tiny zucchini in the jar.
Right.
I want them, just a lot of the moisture out, because there's a lot of moisture in zucchini, and then if you're going to make lasagna, there's moisture in the tomato and the other ingredients.
You don't want
and
it to be
it's
too
all,
wet.
it absorbs that beautiful flavor that you're putting, all those
So
vegetables
people
together.
who either
And then
are-
I freeze them. I don't leave them in a jar. I freeze them because they're not totally dehydrated.
Okay, so when they're still bendable, I presume.
Yeah, they would be still soft.
Freeze them, then you take them out, and you use them as noodles.
I use them as noodles, yeah. Instead of using the pasta, I'll
So-
just use zucchini strips in my lasagna.
Anyone worried about gluten or
Yeah,
conscious of diet?
exactly, yeah. And it's, healthier than flour,
Yeah. How does it taste?
I would think. It tastes great.
I bet it does.
I really like it, yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Anything else on display we haven't talked about? Well, with
We
potatoes,
didn't talk about the
you'll-
turnip
Oh,
or the
the-
carrots, so the potatoes.
well, you've dehydrated carrots,
Yes, I have, and
and
actually,
you've pickled them.
there's a little jar there,
A little
Sally.
jar. Oh, look
That's
at-
dehydrated carrot.
wow, nice orange, of course.
Yeah, and if I want to make a carrot cake, I could use some of this instead of, if I didn't have fresh carrots, I could just rehydrate this and put it into my cake.
And potatoes you have dehydrated
Yes.
for chips. You didn't bring any in, though.
Well,
you
actually,
ate them all.
yeah, I ate them. No, the potatoes, I do have quite a few at home, and what I'll use them for is for scallop potatoes.
Oh.
So I'll just put them in a dish with, milk and
And the
butter
milk will
and
rehydrate them,
onions,
yeah.
and they'll get all rehydrated. And
So you're
yeah, they
saving
work well.
you're doing work at this end, but you're saving yourself time.
Exactly, yes. I'm saving myself a lot of time at the other end because I don't have to peel them or slice them or anything.
And we were joking about the turnip that
turnips,
you've never had a
yeah.
run on. People
I have a
saying turnips.
really good crop of turnips this year. I've got to come up with some turnip ideas.
Have you tried dehydrating them?
Yes, there's a little jar of dehydrated turnip too, somewhere over there. Right here. So this is dehydrated turnip.
Mm-hmm.
So I could throw some of that into soup.
Stews, and I know turnips and potatoes make a really good mash. Mash
Yes,
together.
they do, yeah.
Turnips, potatoes, and sweet potatoes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah,
And this is-
roasted vegetables. I mean,
Yes,
well, you wouldn't
roasted
use
root.
them dehydrated.
No,
but
roasted root
fresh.
vegetables, yeah.
Roasted root vegetables. We had that for Thanksgiving, and yeah, it was really tasty.
So, what advice do you have for people if they haven't tried to grow anything?
Start small. That's my advice. If you're going to have a garden, you've never gardened before, start small. Start with a little garden. You'll be amazed at how much you can get out of a little garden. And a little garden is not going to take all your time for weeding, and if you find out that you're like a compulsive gardener like me, then you grow bigger.
Bigger than you almost need to be. So,
Well,
so even
exactly.
a patio, you can have a patio
Oh,
tomato.
you can plant
and,
in, I've been playing around with growing stuff in pots, and potatoes grow really well in pots. And carrots will do, they're okay. Beets do well in pots. I grew cauliflower in a pot this year. And I've grown zucchini in pots, and zucchini did really well in pots. So, if you get a big pot, not a little pot, you need a big pot and good soil.
So-
and you can get a good crop out of potted plants.
So generally, your advice is do it.
Just go ahead and do it. Exactly.
And if you do it, you'll end up with some wonderful produce
That's
like
right.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for joining us with Sitting with Sally. It was great to have you, Wilma.
Oh, thank you, Sally. It was fun.
And I'm looking forward to eating some of this.
For sure.
Until next time.